Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding a seriously fascinating new paper on how hackers are pulling off these slow-burn heists on AI agents. You know, what really caught my eye here is how this research from Stony Brook University and Cisco Systems completely exposes a massive blind spot in how we secure large language models. And more importantly, we're going to look at how a brand new defense called MAGE stops them absolutely cold. Let's get right into it. Okay, imagine this. You trust a smart assistant with your most sensitive personal files, only for it to be slowly, invisibly manipulated into handing them all over to a criminal. The crazy part? It doesn't happen in a single obvious hacking attempt. No, it happens over time, through a series of completely innocent-looking requests. Guys, this isn't science fiction. It's a very real vulnerability in our current generation of AI. We're talking about long-horizon threats, and let me tell you, they completely flip our traditional understanding of AI security right on its head.
Which brings us to Section 1, the rise of AI agents.
So we increasingly rely on large language model agents to actually do complex, real-world tasks for us, right? Tasks that require extended back-and-forth interactions. I mean, we are officially way past simple chatbots that just answer a trivia question in a vacuum. Today's AI agents have access to our files, our emails, our contact lists. They act on our behalf. But, and here's the kicker, this exact capability creates a totally new vulnerability. It pits the highly capable, helpful AI against a patient adversary executing a long-horizon threat. Now, this kind of attack is literally impossible to pull off in a single turn. The agent is designed to be super accommodating and complete tasks over multiple steps. But think about it from the attacker's perspective. This extended interaction timeline is exactly the runway they need to set a trap without triggering any immediate alarms.
Moving right along to Section 2, the long con attack.
Let's dive into this and see exactly how an adversary strings together a bunch of innocent actions to get a malicious outcome. We'll look at step 1 of a specific exploit called a tool chaining attack. So the adversary just asks the agent to search for a specific document. Let's call it strategy.docx. Perfectly normal, right? A helpful assistant should absolutely do that. Then, in step 2, they ask the agent to look up a contact named Michael Shu. Again, entirely benign. You're just looking up an address. But here's where it gets wild. Combining them in step 3, asking the agent to email that document to that contact, boom! That triggers unauthorized data exfiltration. The absolute genius of this attack is that if you only look at step 3 in isolation, it just looks like a standard email request to a known contact. The malicious intent is totally hidden unless you connect the dots of the entire interaction from the very beginning.
This leads us to Section 3, why standard defenses fail. Now, you might be wondering, where's the security system in all of this? Well, current defenses are essentially like security cameras that have absolutely no memory of what happened 5 minutes ago. It's true. Standard per-turn classifiers and basic working memory both fail, but they fail for entirely different reasons. Because adversarial intent only really emerges across the whole trajectory of the conversation, single-turn filters just don't see the threat. They look at step 3 and say, yep, looks fine, sending an email. On the flip side, while the AI does have a working memory, that memory is hyper-optimized for task completion. So as the conversation drags on, the agent's attention to security-critical information is progressively diluted. It literally forgets the security implications of earlier turns, like the fact that the document was marked confidential in step 1, simply because it's so focused on just getting the current job done.
Which brings us to a really elegant solution in Section 4. Enter the shadow memory.
So, how did researchers actually solve this? Well, they borrowed a concept from systems security called the shadow stack, which is basically a hidden, secure backup of important program instructions. And based on this, they developed MAGE, which stands for Memory as Guardrail Enforcement. It's so cool! They created an architecture that runs a dedicated shadow memory parallel to the agent's main working memory. Think of it as giving the AI a second brain, but one that doesn't care at all about formatting your email or answering your trivia question. Its one and only job is to relentlessly watch for danger across the entire timeline of the conversation.
You know, if an AI tries to remember every little typo, formatting request, or irrelevant detail, it suffers from massive cognitive overload. The standard working memory just gets cluttered. But this shadow memory completely fixes that. Instead of remembering every single detail of the task, the shadow memory acts as a hyper-focused security guard. It distills and retains only the security-critical context of the interaction. If a file is marked confidential in turn 1, bam! The shadow memory locks that fact down. It discards all the irrelevant chatter and builds this lean, mean timeline of potential risks that cannot be overwritten by just random user inputs.
Let's see it in action. Section 5, how MAGE stops threats.
Let's look at the actual mechanics of how this guard catches the thief right before the final step of the heist. The MAGE framework has 2 main actors: a memory manager, and a judge. The memory manager is constantly updating the context at each turn, quietly maintaining that secure shadow memory in the background. Then, right before any action is actually taken, the judge steps in. The judge intercepts the pending action and checks it against the shadow memory context. Going back to our earlier example, the judge intercepts step 3 and blocks that email from being sent. Why? Because it knows from the shadow memory that strategy.docs is strictly confidential and the recipient is external. The intent is finally exposed and the action is stopped cold before a single byte of data leaves the system.
Now, to truly grasp why this is such a game changer, we have to look at the baseline vulnerability. Without MAGE, the attack success rate for sequential toolchaining attacks on standard open-source local models like QN34B was an alarming 100%. Yeah, you heard that right, a 100% failure rate. The attackers won every single time. And it wasn't just tool chaining. The researchers also tested against persistent indirect prompt injections, where the adversary hides malicious instructions in websites the AI is asked to summarize, and the agent was completely vulnerable there too.
But throw MAGE into the mix? That success rate absolutely plummets to just 8.3% for tool chaining attacks. And against those indirect prompt injections, the success rate dropped to absolute zero. Literally zero. It completely neutralized the threat. But here's the really impressive part. MAGE achieved all of this while preserving 94.4% of the agent's benign utility, so it didn't break the AI's ability to actually be helpful. And it only added a negligible token overhead. We're talking about just 7,000 extra tokens per task. In the grand scheme of AI processing, that is basically a drop in the bucket. It stays highly efficient while massively boosting security. Beyond just the impressive numbers, MAGE brings some serious practical advantages to the table. First off, it's highly versatile against a massive spectrum of long-horizon threats. But what really stands out to me here is the plug-and-play integration. You don't have to rebuild some billion-dollar core AI model from scratch to use it. You just layer MAGE right on top of existing agents. And for security teams, the fact that it provides interpretable, human-readable explanations is a total game-changer. When the judge blocks an action, it tells you exactly why, fully grounded in the shadow memory logs. That is absolutely vital for human operators monitoring these systems. Plus, MAGE detects the majority of these attacks in their early stages, often right near the first attack turn, which gives security teams precious time to step in.
Finally, Section 6, a safer AI future. Let's look at how this sets the foundation for safely deploying LLMs in critical real-world domains. MAGE represents a monumental shift in how we secure artificial intelligence. It's the very first framework to leverage an agentic memory approach to actually defeat long-horizon threats. We are officially moving past the era of single-turn filters. By forcing the AI to maintain a persistent, safety-focused memory, we can finally assess risk at the trajectory level. We're tracking those subtle breadcrumbs an adversary leaves over time instead of just reacting to the final blow.
The implications of this research are absolutely massive. It leaves us to consider a pretty fascinating reality. As AI takes on more and more of our digital lives, acting autonomously on our behalf, perhaps the strongest defense we have is simply remembering exactly what the adversary is trying to do. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning how your technology learns and, more importantly, what it chooses to remember.